To create an interface, you need to go to the Library tab. At the Library tab, you need to click on New Interface at the ribbon menu. The New Interface dialog will open. Here you can choose from a selection of interface templates. We will select blank and give our interface a name. Let's call it Custom Interface. And then click on Create. Once the interface has been created, the library will update the list of items and the custom interface will be listed among the items. To open the interface, we need to double click on the library item. The interface will then open in the editor. As you can see, the interface is nearly empty except for the container and the viewport. In the next few parts of this tutorial, we're going to make some of the most common elements that you will find in interfaces, starting with the navigation bar. In order to place our navigation bar, we first need to make space at the bottom of the interface. To do this, we need to change the bottom margin of the container object in the interface. When you select the container, you will notice that the property panel of the container is quite different compared to the sections that can be found in other types of objects. At the container you will only find two sections, margin and interactions. We need to change the bottom margin, so let's set the bottom margin here to 48 pixels. As a result of our bottom margin setting, you will see that a white space at the bottom has appeared. Next we need to add a rectangle that will serve as the background for our navigation bar. So now I'm going to select the rectangle tool from the toolbar and then we're going to draw a rectangle at the bottom of the stage area. Next we need to create a group around the rectangle so that all the objects that will be on our navigation bar can be neatly organized. To do this, we need to click on Group at the ribbon menu. Our rectangle has now been wrapped into our newly created group. To make sure that the objects in our interface can be distinguished, we need to make sure that our objects will be named properly. So let's give our group and rectangle some proper names. Since the group will be the base for the navigation bar, let's call our group Navigation Bar. And the rectangle serves as the background, so we will call the rectangle background. Next we need to set the position constraints of our group to left, right and bottom and set the height to 48 pixels. Also make sure that the left, right and bottom positions are set to 0. This way it will maintain a position at the bottom that we need. Also make sure that the left, right and bottom positions from the background have all been set to 0. It's important to realize that our navigation bar has a variable width. Because we are using both the left and right position constraints, this inherently means that the contents of the navigation bar need to be set for this variable width. For the background of the navigation bar, this means that it should stretch to the width and height of the navigation bar. This is why we have set the top, left, right and bottom position to 0. Let's also set the background color of our background to white, so that the icons that we're going to place on the navigation bar will have some contrast compared to the background. Let's start adding the buttons for navigating to the next and previous pages. In my library, I've uploaded some icons that I'm going to use for the interface. The icons come from a set that is called Slim Square Icons, and they have been created by Qing Li. You can download the entire set for free at iconfinder.com. So now I'm going to drag the left and right icons onto the stage area, and you need to make sure that they are inside the navigation bar. Now that my navigation icons are in place, the first thing that I need to do is name the icons to something more appropriate. So let's call them Navigate Previous and Navigate Next. Next, we need to make sure that they maintain a horizontally centered position. To do this, we need to change the position constraints to top and horizontal. Let's also set the horizontal property to -100 and the top property to 0 pixels. We need to do the same for the icon on the right, but this time we will set the horizontal property to 100 instead of -100. Now that our icons or buttons are in place, let's start adding the navigation interactions. So I'm going to click on the Add Interaction icon at the Interaction section of the Property panel. The Interactions dialog will now open. The interaction that you want to use is mouse click, and since this has already been selected, you don't have to change anything here. Next, you need to select the action that will be applied when the interaction is triggered. Here we will select Navigate to Page. The default value is here Next Page, and since that's exactly what we want to do, no further configurations are required. When using the Navigate to Page action, you don't really need a target. By default, you will find that the object to which the interaction has been added is the same as the target, and since we don't really need a target for the Navigate to Page interaction, the Navigate to Page action, we will just leave it like this. To save our newly created interaction, all you need to do is press Apply. As you can see, our interaction has been added. Let's move on to the icon on the left. Here we need to do pretty much the same as we did for the icon on the right, but this time we need to select Pref Page as the value for the Navigate to Page action. So here we go, and just click on Apply. Okay, now our previous and next page navigation buttons are done. Let's move on to part 5. To add page stumps to our interface, we need to add the page stumps object. The page stump object contains the page item object. The page item will be duplicated for each page of the edition in the viewer. When the user clicks on the page item, the page to which the page item belongs to will then be opened. The page item can be customized like a group and by default contains two objects, the name and the thumb. These objects will be automatically filled with the page's information. Adding the page stumps to your page can be done by clicking on the page stumps button at the toolbar. We're going to create a contents panel for our interface. The page stumps will be inside of the contents panel. So what we will do first is add the page stumps by clicking the page stumps button on the toolbar. Once the page stumps have been added, we're going to wrap a group around the page stumps. The group will serve as the contents panel, so let's name our group Contents Panel. The content panel should match the width of the navigation bar and it should appear on top of the navigation bar. To do this, we need to set the position constraints to left, right and bottom. Then we will set the left and right properties to 0 pixels and the bottom value to 48 pixels. The height of the contents panel, I will set this to 160 pixels. The next thing to do would be to set the position constraints of the page stumps so that it will adapt to the size of the contents panel. So I will set the position constraints to top, left, right and bottom and the value of each property to 10 pixels. The page item should also be configured to use the same height as the page stumps, minus the 15 pixels of the scroll bars. So we will enter 125 for the height of the page item. Our contents panel should also have a background color, so let's set the background of the contents panel to light gray. The next thing to do is add a button that will open the contents panel. Again, I will use an icon that I have in my library. I want to place the contents button in the center of the navigation bar, so the position constraints should be set to horizontal and bottom. Both values should have 0. Since that this button is going to have an interaction that will open the contents panel, we need to name this button Contents Button Show. Then we will add a rectangle at the same position as the Contents Button Show object and name it Contents Button Hide. The reason that we Need two objects for this is because contents button show will show the contents panel and contents button hide will hide the contents panel. So let's set the width to 48 and also the height to 48 and set it to bottom and horizontal. The opacity to 0. We also need to make sure that contents button hide will not be visible at first, so we will disable the visible property at the property panel. And of course we need to name it contents button hide. Now that our buttons are in place, let's go and add the interactions that our buttons need to open and close the contents panel. So let's add the interaction that we need for the contents button hide. First we need to add an interaction that will hide the button itself so that contents button show will become clickable. That means that the target should be contents button hide, which it already is by default, and the action that we need is visibility, and the visibility property should remain disabled. Let's apply these settings and add another interaction which will close the contents panel. The next thing to do is to add an interaction to the page item so that contents panel will be closed when the user clicks on a page item. And we also need to add an interaction that will hide contents button hide when the page item is clicked. So let's go and add the interactions to the page item. Because we need to hide the contents panel, the contents panel will be the target. And the action that we need is the visibility action with visible disabled. Now let's also add the interaction for hiding contents button hide. We also need to add two interactions to contents button show. The interaction that we need is to show or display contents button hide and to show the contents panel. So let's first go and show contents button hide, and the second interaction for showing the contents panel. Now that we've set the interactions for the contents panel, we can go and test the contents panel using the preview. So let's open the preview. As you can see, our navigation bar is at the bottom together with the buttons that we have added, and when I click on the contents button, the contents panel will open. Then when I click on one of the page items, the contents panel will close. Also, when I click on the contents button and then when it is open and click on the contents button again, the contents panel will close. The page number and page total features can be used to display the current page's number and the total number of pages of the edition. There isn't a special type of object that you need to add for the page number and page total. Instead, you can just use the text objects. Then all you need to do is set the names of these objects to specific names. The first thing that we need to do is add a text object to our navigation bar. To do this, we're going to select the text tool from the toolbar and then draw a text object. And I'm going to set the width to 32 pixels and align it on the right side. The name of the text object should be page number. With the uppercase N, and all the other characters should be lowercase. It is important that you name the object exactly this way, else it will not work. Then we need to copy the page number object and rename the copy to page total. To make the text objects more obvious for users, you can add a slash between page number and page total. Here I will set the width to 20 pixels. Let's also align and position our text objects. Now if we look at the preview, you will see that the page numbers text is 0 and the page totals text is changed to 5. If you're going to look at these objects in the edition preview, you will see that the page number will be adjusted every time you change the page. In the page preview, it will just show 0. Adding a menu can be done in pretty much the same way as we did for the contents panel. So what we need to do first is add the share icon to the navigation bar. Then we're going to wrap the share icon in a group. The group will in this case serve as the menu, so I'm just going to call this menu. Let's also change the background color to light gray. And let's also name our share icon. Our menu needs to appear on top of the navigation bar. So what you need to do is change the position constraints to left and bottom. The left and bottom positions will be 20 and 48 pixels. The width and height of the menu will be 200 pixels. To make the share button You need to select the share icon and wrap it again in a group. The width of the share button should be the same as the menu. So let's set the position constraints to left, right and top. To make the share button look more like an actual button, I'm going to add a label to the share button. And let's also name our share button Share Button. The next thing to do is to add the interactions to the share button. We need to add two interactions, one for the share action and another one for hiding the menu once the user has clicked the button. So we need to click on the Add Interaction icon. The action that we need is the Share Social Media action. There are several types for sharing social media. Each type will basically share something different. For example, the edition or the current page. I'm going to choose current edition. We don't need to change the target because the share social media action doesn't really need a target. Then we also need to add the interaction for hiding the menu. So once again I'm going to click on the Add Interaction icon. And this time the menu is the target. And the action is visibility with the visible property disabled. The interactions that we've set up now will open the share on social media dialog and also close the menu. Next we need to add a button on the navigation bar that will open the menu when the user clicks on it. So I'm going to drag an icon from the library onto the navigation bar. We need to make sure that it's on the navigation bar and not on the menu. And let's name it Button Menu Open. And let's set the positions to align with the menu. So there will be 20 pixels left and the bottom position should be 0. We also need a hit area that will be used to close the menu if the user clicks the button again. Just like with the Contents button, we will draw a rectangle and then give it the same position as Button Menu Open. Also we need to set the width and height to 48 pixels. And let's name it Button Menu Close. Then we need to add an interaction that will close the menu and another interaction to hide Button Menu Close itself. So the target for the first interaction will be Button Menu Close and the action will be visibility with the visible property disabled. And now the second interaction. The target should be menu, and again the action is visibility with the visible property disabled. Lastly, we need to set the opacity to 0% and the visible property should be disabled. Now that we've created button menu close, we should also add an interaction to the share button, which will hide button menu close when it is clicked. So let's select share button and add the interaction. So the target is button menu close and the action is visibility with the visible property disabled. Next we need to add the interactions to button menu open. The interactions that we need to add are for displaying the menu. So I'm going to select menu as the target and enable the visibility action with the visible property enabled. And we need another interaction for making button menu close appear once you click on button menu open. So button menu close is the target and we will use the visibility action with the visible property enabled. The last thing that we need to do is to disable the visible property on the menu so it doesn't show up immediately. Let's have a look at the menu in the preview to see our menu in action. So when you click on button menu open, the menu appears. Unfortunately, we cannot test the share social media action in the page preview, but when we click on button menu close, the menu will close. As you can see, our menu works, so let's move on to the next part of this tutorial. Our custom interface is now ready to be used. The next thing to do is to configure Barisco to use our custom interface. This needs to be done from the dashboard. So let's head over to the dashboard. And at the dashboard you need to click on the Interfaces button at the ribbon menu. The Interfaces dialog will then open. At the Interfaces dialog you will find three tabs on the left: Desktop, iOS and Android. Each of these tabs gives you the ability to set a different interface for each platform. This basically means that you can have a different interface for desktops, iOS devices and Android devices. Since that we're testing our interface on a desktop computer, we will set the desktop interface setting to use our custom interface. To change the interface, all you need to do is click on the folder icon. The Select Interface dialog will then open, and as you can see, our custom interface is among the listed interfaces. So now we will select our custom interface and then press Change. The default property at the Interfaces dialog has now been set to our custom interface. Next we need to click on Save. Next, let's go and test our custom interface. To do this, we need to go to the Editions overview and then click on Preview Browser. As you can see, our custom interface is now showing up as the interface for the edition, and on the left side we have our menu and we can close it. In the center we have our contents button, and on the left and on the right of the content button we have the navigation arrows, and of course on the right side we have our page number and page total. And when I resize the browser, you can see that our navigation is adjusting to the size of the user's browser. This concludes the video tutorial on how to create a custom interface in Barisco. Please also watch our other video tutorials on barisco.com/tutorials. Thank you for watching.